Let us proceed to addition formulas, or it is sometimes called the sum and difference of two angles identities. So suppose you have two angles alpha and beta. We'd like to derive what would be the value if, or what would be the value for sine alpha plus beta. We also want to derive the value for sine alpha minus beta, cosine alpha plus beta, and cosine alpha minus beta. Okay. So, ang una natin gagawin is to plot etong values na to, either alpha plus beta or alpha minus beta. So, how about if we illustrate it like this? Suppose we have this Cartesian again, okay? Then, unit circle pa rin, or let's use a 1 unit radius tapos i-turn natin siya. Okay? So, let's start with yung alpha yung pinakamalaki. So, let's start with alpha. Let's say this angle is alpha. Then this unit is 1. Okay? So, let me plot dito na lang. Or how about kung mas okay sana may circle. So, mag-draw na lang tayo ng circle around. Ito yung alpha natin dito. Let's take this as alpha. So, this is now alpha. Then, beta, ito. Let's say, ito yung beta. From here to here, that's beta. Okay? Or, i-move pa natin baba para mas, or taas. Taasan pa natin na lang. Ito. Ayan. So, this angle is beta. Now, the difference between the two angles, so this minus this is equal to this. That is now, eto na yung alpha minus beta. Okay? So, let's call this part here as P sub beta. Kasi siya yung point wherein the angle is beta. This point naman, let's call this P sub alpha. Kasi ito yung point para dito sa alpha. Okay? Then, what will happen if, remember again, this is a unit circle, so the length is 1. So, what would happen if ito siya na quantity ng angle, ilipat natin siya dito. Meaning, i-coincide pa rin natin. What I mean is, halimbawa ito, i-turn natin siya ganito lahat. So, itong side na to, i-coincide natin dito. So, syempre, if mag-retain itong value, ito na siya. Diba? Wherein, this is this. Pareho lang. Nakuha? So, if we do that, ito na lang. Ito siya. Ito na yung itsura niya. Okay? And this angle is still alpha minus beta. Ni-retain natin yung difference of, or the angle in between this segment. So, let's call this point here as P sub alpha minus beta. Yan, kanina lang. So, eto siya, if this is a unit circle, if this is 1 unit, eto siya, this is 1, 0. Okay? That is 1, 0. Let's call this point A. So, if we plot the points, that would be point A is at 1, 0. How about point P alpha minus beta? Okay? That would be, what is this distance? Diba this is cosine? So, 1 cosine alpha minus beta. Tapos, ito naman, 1 sine. Diba? Dito. What I'm referring to is this. This. This is C cosine. This is C sine. So, yung C natin doon is 1. So, that is 1 times cosine. Ito, 1 times sine. So, the angle here is alpha minus beta. So, this distance is cosine alpha minus beta. This distance is sine alpha minus beta. Ayan. So, the coordinates of this point is cosine alpha minus beta and sine alpha minus beta. Okay? Then, how about this point? P sub beta. For P sub beta, of course, Ito siya na triangle. So, yung angle natin is beta. O, ito. This angle is beta. So, therefore, this is just 1 cosine beta and it's 1 cosine beta. Of course, yung sa y naman is 1 sine beta. So, that's its coordinate. Sunod is this. So, it's alpha. Simply, it's p sub alpha with coordinates cosine alpha sine alpha. Now, if this, let's say na lang, if this triangle is just this triangle na nirelocate lang natin, that means this side is equal to this side. So, this side is the same as this side. Okay? Let's call this na lang distance 1 and this is distance 2. So what we are saying is that distance 1 is the same or equal to distance 2. So by distance formula, let us solve for distance 1. So that means d1 squared is equal to d2 squared. So remember distance formula, naka-square. So we just squared para we don't need to write the square root anymore. So getting the distance between this point and this point, that would be the change in x or increment in x, the increment in x plus squared, then plus the increment of y. Or, again, isulat natin dito, distance formula is equal to the increment of x squared plus the increment in y squared. Okay? Okay, so for... Oh, sige. Okay. Now, we are looking for the distance between this point and this point. So, ito yon. So, that would be cosine alpha minus beta minus 1. That means this minus this squared plus sa y naman this minus this sine alpha minus beta squared. That's equal to this distance naman, or that would be these 2 points, distance between these 2 points. So we do that. How about if we just delete this? Kasi lalampas naman. So same process, this minus this squared and this minus this squared. So that's equal to cosine alpha minus cosine beta squared plus sine alpha minus sine beta squared. Then operate na lang natin, simplify. So this is just a binomial raised to 2, so expansion lang. We have cosine squared alpha minus beta minus 2 cosine alpha minus beta plus 1 squared, which is 1. Then plus, so just square this, that's sine squared alpha minus beta. So that's equal to the expansion sa other side. We'll have cosine squared alpha minus 2 cosine alpha cosine beta plus cosine squared beta. Okay, then let's expand this, plus sine squared alpha minus 2 sine alpha sine beta plus sine squared beta. Okay, so if you recall, sine squared theta plus cosine squared theta is equal to 1. So since we have here sine squared alpha minus beta and cosine squared alpha minus beta, so this will be reduced to 1. So we have 1 minus, so use this, 1 minus 2 cosine alpha minus beta plus 1. That is equal to, in the other side, we have this and this will be reduced to 1. So let me mark that. This and this will be reduced to 1. Then let's write minus 2 cosine alpha cosine beta, and then this and this will be reduced to 1. So we'll have plus 1 minus 2 sine alpha sine beta sine beta. So we'll have 2 minus 2 cosine alpha minus beta. That's equal to 2 minus 2 cosine alpha cosine beta minus 2 sine alpha sine beta. And we could cancel this both. So that's negative 2 cosine alpha minus beta. And from here we could factor out negative 2. So that's negative 2 cosine alpha cosine beta plus sine alpha sine beta. So we could cancel out negative 2 from both sides. So we'll have cosine alpha minus beta is equivalent to cosine alpha cosine beta plus sine alpha sine beta. So this is now our first identity na na-derive. So let's write it here. So this is now equal to cosine alpha cosine beta plus sine alpha sine beta. So this is our first identity for the sum and difference you need to memorize. Now, we could derive the second identity by just using the other identities that we have already memorized. So how about if we derive cosine alpha plus beta? So let's rewrite that here. Cosine alpha plus beta. Yung meron tayo is a difference, cosine alpha minus beta. So kailangan natin yung sa addition, cosine alpha plus beta. Pwede naman din natin gawing difference to. We could rewrite this as cosine alpha minus negative beta. So difference na siya. We just use a negative angle. That would be equal to the same pattern here, cos, sin, sin. Cosine alpha, cosine beta, sine alpha, sine beta. Okay, using that pattern or that formula, we have cosine alpha, cosine negative beta, plus sine alpha, sine negative beta. Okay. Now, let us apply the negative angle identities that we previously derived. Saan na yun? That's complementary. This one. This. Okay. Now, the cosine of a negative angle is equal to the cosine of the angle itself. So, this is simply cosine alpha cosine beta because this is equal to this. Now, for sine, iba. The sine of a negative angle is equal to the negative sine of that angle. So, we have sine alpha times negative sine beta. Okay? Ito yan. We use this identity. Asan yung negative? Ito. So, we use that identity. Now, if we continue this, that would be cosine alpha cosine beta minus sine alpha sine beta. So, the identity is just similar, pero na iba lang yung sign. So, cosine alpha plus beta is equal to cosine alpha cosine beta minus sine alpha sine beta. So, kailangan i-memorize, but it's easy to memorize. It's just similar to the other identity that we memorized. Okay, how about if we derive sine alpha minus beta? Asa natin pwedeng kunin? So, ang gagawin natin dito, we could use, ano pa yung mga tapos na identity? We could use complementary because that identity transforms sine to cosine, right? So, if we look back sa complementary angle identities, we have this, yung sine, pwedeng ma-transform to cosine. Or, eto, yung sine of an angle is just equal to the complement, or to the cosine of the complement of that angle. So, we could say that the sine of this angle is equal to the cosine of the complement of that angle. Okay? So, eto siya. This is already the cosine of a difference of two angles. Okay? So, we take na siya as difference. So, eto na siya. Gagamitin ulit. Okay. Now, let us rewrite this as cosine of pi over 2 minus alpha. Kasing complement, that's pi over 2, diba? I have already mentioned that earlier. Plus beta. If I just follow this, kung natin agad yung identity using cosine pi over 2 and eto silang magkagrupo, maka-cancel out lang, parang nag-prove lang tayo ng formula. But since we are deriving, let me use associative property. I'll associate these two, no, I'll group these two para eto sila yung magkasama. So I'll do that by writing this way. Cosine pi over 2 minus pi plus beta. Okay? Now, eto instead, ang gagamitin natin dito is sa addition na. Eto na, cosine alpha plus beta na pattern, which is just cos minus sin. Okay? So, that would be cosine alpha, pi over 2 minus alpha, cos, so cosine beta, then minus sine pi over 2 minus alpha, then sine beta. Now, eto, we are looking at complement. So, cosine of the complement of theta. So, what is the cosine of the complement of, alpha? What is the cosine of the complement of alpha? So, as we have already derived, that's sine alpha. So, copy cosine alpha again dire. Minus, how about here? What is the sine of the complement of alpha? That is cosine. So, that's cosine alpha, sine beta. So, therefore, this is now the identity for the difference of the sine of the difference of two angles. So, we have sine alpha cosine beta minus cosine alpha sine beta. So, the pattern is just sin, cos, sin. Then, pareho lang yung sign dito. So, that's another identity you need to memorize. So, ito, the same pa rin yung approach dito. So, I'll not do that anymore. But I will just give you the formula. That's sin, cos, cosine pa rin. Pero pareho yung sign. Sin alpha, cosine beta plus cosine alpha, sine beta. So, these identities are important. Pabalik-balik to sa calculus. So, you need to memorize all these identities. That is for the addition or sum and difference identities. Okay? The derivation for tangent, let's start with tangent alpha plus beta. The derivation of this comes from sine alpha plus beta over cosine alpha plus beta. So, pwede nyo i-derive na lang to by yourselves kasi the formula for sine alpha plus beta and cosine alpha plus beta are already given in this set of identities. Ayan. So, medyo tricky lang siya kasi that's complex fractions. But, to make this discussion short, I will just give you the formula for this. Alpha plus beta, that's equal to tangent alpha plus tangent beta over 1 minus tangent alpha tangent beta. And for tangent alpha minus beta, that is we just reverse the sign. So, tangent alpha minus tangent beta over 1 plus tangent alpha tangent beta. So, that's it. So, need to memorize this also. Okay? Now, let's proceed to double angle identity. So, for double angle identities, you need to derive sine 2 alpha, cosine 2 alpha, and tangent 2 alpha. So, how do we do that? Siyempre ako din sasagot. So, let's start with sine 2 alpha. Sine 2 alpha is just the same as sine alpha plus alpha, right? Alpha plus alpha is 2 alpha, right? So, from here, we could use the sum of two angle identities for sine. which is sin, cos, cosine, yung mnemonics niya. So we have sin, cos, plus cos, sin. And simple, ito is just the same as this. Gumamit lang siya ng commutative property, di ba? Binaliktad lang siya dito. That's just the same. So meaning it's just 2 sine alpha cosine alpha. So the first identity, or for sine 2 alpha, that's 2 sine alpha cosine alpha. Memorize again. Okay? Napakadali. Now for cosine 2 alpha, that is the same approach. We use the same approach. We have cosine alpha plus alpha. And if you recall, for cosine alpha plus alpha, or alpha plus beta, it's cos minus sin. So cos minus sin. Then you just simplify, that's cosine squared alpha minus sine squared alpha. So therefore, cosine 2 alpha is equal to cosine squared alpha minus sine squared alpha. Again, you need to memorize this. Now, for tangent, ganun pa rin yung approach. We have tangent tangent 2 alpha is equal to tangent alpha plus alpha, which is the same as tangent alpha plus tangent alpha over 1 minus tangent alpha. So that becomes 2 tangent alpha over 1 minus tangent squared alpha. So tangent 2 alpha is equal to 2 tangent alpha over 1 minus tangent squared alpha. Memorize. Napakadali. So ganun yan siya kadali. That's for two angle identities. We have 3 identities. Now let's proceed to another set of identities. Half angle identities. What for half angle identities? How would we derive that? Okay. So let's try to take a look at cosine 2 alpha, which is equal to cosine squared alpha minus sine squared alpha. Ito, I just used this identity. Okay? So from here, you notice that we have a double angle here, which is double of this, of alpha. Right? So kung ibalik na rin natin, gawin natin tong theta, that means ito is theta over 2. Diba? Because the double of theta over 2 is theta. Nakuha nyo? The double of theta is the double of alpha is 2 alpha. Now, if this is theta, then this should be theta over 2 because the double of theta over 2 is theta. Okay? Pero mamaya. So, isolve natin yung cosine or sine alpha. Sige na ito. If we let alpha equal to theta over 2, so therefore 2 alpha is equal to theta. So I'll have cosine alpha is equal to cosine squared theta over 2 minus sine squared theta over 2. Now, I want to solve, let's say, either sine over 2 or theta over 2. So pwede ko siyang gawin ganito. Recall that Pythagorean identity sine squared theta is equal to 1 minus cosine squared theta. That's Pythagorean identity kanina na na-discuss. So I could replace this to 1 minus cosine squared theta. So that would be cosine squared theta over 2. Ayan. So I could replace this by its Pythagorean identity. So that's minus, replace natin by 1 minus cosine squared. So the angle is theta over 2 pa rin. Ayan. Then that would become cosine theta is equal to cosine, or eto magiging addition na to. Then if we combine it here, magiging 2 cosine squared theta over 2, then minus 1. Then if we solve for cosine theta over 2, that would be cosine, or 2 cosine squared theta over 2, that's equal to 1 plus cosine theta, or I simply transfer it here. Then akong gi-flip or flinip ko. Okay? Now, cosine squared theta over 2 is equal to 1/2 of 1 plus cosine theta. So, extracting the square root of both sides, you'll have cosine theta over 2 that's equal to the square root of 1/2 1 plus cosine theta. Okay? Actually, ito siya. You can use this as power reduction identity. Ito yung half angle identity. Now, the same method yung pag-derive sa cosine. Sa sine pala. Meron tayong cosine. So, isulat ko muna ha. For cosine theta over 2, that's square root of 1/2 of 1 plus cosine theta. Sa sine, pwedeng kayo na lang yung mag-derive, the same process, but sa sine, ito yung i-change nyo. Dito kayo mag-change sa Pythagorean identity. So, you just do that para madali yung discussion natin. Makasample problems na tayo. For sine theta over 2, that is square root of 1/2 times 1 minus cosine theta. Ayan. So, that's it. So, you need to memorize this another 2. Okay? That's half angle identities. Now, for power reduction, ito lang yung gagamitin natin. Ito pa rin. Meaning, kung yung power gusto nating i-reduce, ibigay ko na lang. Power reduction. So, for power reduction identities, we have yung sine squared theta. Gusto natin i-reduce yung power niya. Ayaw natin yung squared. So, this will become 1/2 1 minus cosine 2 theta. Okay? And if you notice, that is just the same as this. Ito pa rin yan siya. Yung square root, nilipat ko lang dito. Pero ito na yung ginawa kong buo. So, meaning, kung double to siya dito, so 2 theta na dito. Okay? So, ganun pa rin siya. It's just a play on the variables. Okay? So, for cosine squared theta, I will have 1/2 1 plus cosine 2 theta. Okay? You just memorize that. And if you notice, kahit makalimutan yung mga identities, you can always go back to the derivation kung alam yung mga fundamentals. Okay? So, that's it. So, for problem 13-5, let's try this one. Express the given quantity in terms of sine x and cosine x. Madali lang, no? These are just sum and difference of two angles, no? So, let's try letter A. For letter A, we have cosine alpha plus x. So, that's sum of two angles for cosine. That's cosine sin, diba? So, that's simply cos pi. Cosine sin. So, cosine pi cosine x minus sine pi sine x. And if you recall, what is cosine pi or cosine 180? Pwedeng sasagot, that's negative 1. Nasolve na natin siya kanina. Cosine pi. So, let me, ayan, ito. Cosine pi is negative 1. Okay, so balikan natin. Ito. So, that would be negative cosine x. Or, sige, negative 1 times cosine x. That is pi. Minus, how about sine pi? So, doon pa rin. Actually, sine pi is 0, di ba? Minus 0 times sine x. So, this is simply cancelled out. So, the answer is just negative cosine x. Very easy. Napakadali. So, I just do the same for this and this. For letter C, we have sine 3 pi over 2 minus x. So, that's the difference of two angles for sine. So, that's sin cos sin. So, sin cos minus cos sin. So, that's it. Then, what are the values of sine 3 pi over 2 and cosine 3 pi over 2? So, if you recall that, so kung paano natin ginawa, yung 3 pi over 2, ito siya na angle. So, ito yung radius ng unit circle. Diba? So, kung ito na yung radius ng unit circle, that is similar to this one, di ba? So, ang opposite niya is 1 and yung adjacent niya is 0. That is similar to 90 kasi ka-opposite siya ng 90. If you recall this one, ito. Yung sa 90, ito kasi. But in this case, yung 90 kasi nasa taas. So, yung 270 nasa baba. So, instead na sign of that is positive 1, magiging negative 1 na siya. Pero yung cosine is still 0. Okay? I hope that made sense. So, sine 3 pi over 2 or sine 270 is negative 1. So, that's equal to negative 1 times cosine x minus, this is simply 0. This is simply 0. So, the answer is just also negative cosine x. Or you may check the calculator if you like for that particular problem. Okay? So, letter B, just answer that. Then, let's proceed to another set. We have problems D, E, F. I think yung problem sa D, that's just similar to what we have solved sa una. So, let's just try either of these two. So, we'll try this. Kayo na lang mag-solve ito. So, for letter F, we have tangent x minus cotangent x over tangent x minus cotangent x, plus cotangent x. Now, the instruction again is to express our answers in terms of sine x and cosine x. So recall that tangent is just sine over cosine. So we'll just replace this. We'll just replace to sine x over cosine x minus cotangent is just reciprocal. So we have cosine x over sine x. So divided by tangent is again sine x over cosine x plus cosine x over sine x. Then we solve. That's it. We simplify. And this is just a case of simplifying rational functions, right? So, sa numerator, what will happen sa numerator? The LCD is sine x cosine x. So, sine x cosine x divided by this, so that's equal to this. So, that would be sine squared x minus cosine squared x. Okay? Tama, di ba? Okay. So, sa denominator naman, the same. We have sine x cosine x as our LCD. Then, sine x cosine x divided by cosine is sine times sine, so sine squared. Sine squared x, at the same procedure, this divided by this times this. That's cosine squared x. And Pythagorean identity, that's equal to 1. And the same denominator, maka-cancel out lang to siya. Diba? That's just basic rule of algebra. So therefore, this becomes 1 and maka-cancel out siya. So our answer is just sine squared x minus cosine squared x. So that's our answer. Or we could also rewrite our answer as a factor. So we have sine x plus cosine x times sine x minus cosine x. So, pwedeng ganito yung answer natin. Ganyan lang siya kadali. Okay? So, that's it. For our problem 13-6, we need to prove the following identities. Let me write that. Prove the following identities. Okay? Or just prove the following equation or prove the following equations. Pwedeng ganun. So let's call this A, B, C, and D. So let me start with letter A, then I think yung iba kayang-kaya nyo na. So for letter A, we have cosine raised to 4x minus sine raised to 4x. That's equal daw to cosine 2x. So, ito na lang yung gagawin ko pag-prove nito kasi as you notice, the expression or the terms in the expression in the left side is a little more complicated than on the right side. So, pwede ko naman i-flip ko na lang, di ba? I'll just flip this to cosine 2x equal to cosine raised to 4x minus sine raised to 4x. Then, I'll just manipulate this one to be equal to this one. Anyway, we're just proving kung mag-equate siya or maging equal siya, then we have proved the equation. Okay, now, this one, I could rewrite this as cosine squared x squared minus sine squared x squared. And if you recall, dun sa algebra, this is simply in the form a squared minus b squared, which is a special product of the sum and difference, right? So, therefore, this is just cosine squared x plus sine squared x times cosine squared x minus sine squared x. Okay? And if you recall again by Pythagorean identity, this is just equal to 1. Okay? So that is equal to cosine squared x minus sine squared x. And again, by identities, if you recall, this is just identity for double angle, right? And that is equal to cosine 2x. So we have proven that they are equal. So Q, E, D. Quite easily done. Or quod erat demonstrandum. Okay, how about letter, let's try letter B, but three-way kasi siya. You can prove this, or you can prove this, or you can prove this. Ganun. So, how do we do that? I'll just prove this first. Now, okay, let's proceed. Now, if you want to change this na maging ganito, we need to manipulate this. So, we do that by, I could do that by multiplying it by the conjugate of the denominator. Okay? So, my objective is for this to be transformed to this. So, we have sine x over, talaga ng penmanship, sine x over 1 plus cosine x. Multiply that by 1 minus cosine x over, it's recording, 1 minus cosine x. Or essentially, we're just multiplying by 1. So, the numerator becomes sine x times 1 minus cosine x. Then divided by, this becomes 1 minus cosine squared x. And by Pythagorean identity, the denominator is just equal to sine squared x. Diba? Pythagorean identity, if you recall. Then how about the numerator? The numerator is sine x times 1 minus cosine x. So therefore, ma-cancel out yung isang sine dito. That becomes 1 minus cosine x over sine x. So ayan, pareho na sila. That's Q, E, D. Now, I want to transform that further to eto, ano yung dito? Given, that's tangent x over 2. So, if we want to change that to tangent x over 2, okay, how do we do that? So, that would be employing a half-angle identity. So, kung half-angle identity, ganito. If you recall, the sine, or ibahin natin yung ink, kasi scratch to. The sine of theta over 2 is equal to the square root of 1 half times 1 minus cosine theta over 2. Okay? So, therefore, sine squared theta over 2 is equal to 1 half 1 minus cosine. Oh no, sorry. This should be theta. Distract lang. That should be theta. Ayan. So, this would become 2 sine squared theta over 2. That's equal to 1 minus cosine theta. So, therefore, the numerator could be rewritten as 2 sine squared x over 2, then over sine x. Okay? Yung sine sa ilalim. To be consistent, para lumabas yung tangent x over 2, kailangan maging x over 2 din to siya. So, i-recall natin this time yung sine, double angle pa rin. Sine 2 theta. That is equal to 2 sine theta cosine theta. Now, if you replace 2 theta as x, sine x is equal to 2 sine x over 2 cosine x over 2. Okay, so ito na yun dito. Therefore, we could replace this 2, so that's 2 sine squared x over 2. Then replace the denominator to 2 sine x over 2 times cosine x over 2. Then maka-cancel out yung isang sine ulit. Maka-cancel out yung isang sine. Yung maka-cancel out din yung 2. So we'll have sine x over 2 over cosine x over 2. That's tangent x over 2. So na-prove din natin that's equal to tangent x over 2. Again, QED. Quite easily done. Okay? So let's proceed to another one. How about, ito, just prove letter C. Kasi the solution is just similar to what we have done kanina in the previous equation. Now for letter D, parang ganun pa rin naman. We have two options. We could manipulate this to be equal to this, or pwede din dito, mag-conjugate tayo dito, then transform siya to that. Okay? But if we want to, eto na lang yung i-change natin, madali lang naman because these are just, you can just substitute this in terms of sine and cosine. So for letter D, let me write na lang yung other side of the equation. This secant, so it should be secant 2x minus tangent 2x. So the objective is, dapat yung angle natin instead na 2x, magiging x na lang. Then yung terms natin magiging sine and cosine. Okay? So ito na manipulate natin. So that would be equal to, secant is 1 over cosine 2x minus tangent, which is sine 2x over cosine 2x. Ganun. So, the same yung ano nila. They have the same denominator. So, just combine the numerator 1 minus sine 2x over cosine 2x. Then, if you recall, sine 2x is 2 sine x cosine x. Again, we want to change 2x to x na lang. So, that's why we are using the double angle identity. For the denominator, again, that's double angle identity. That's just cosine squared x minus sine squared x. Okay, now, the denominator could be rewritten as the product of the sum and difference of cosine and sine. So, cosine x, plus sine x times cosine x minus sine x. Diba? So, pwede siya. And the numerator is still 1 minus 2 sine x cosine x. Okay. Now, how do we further manipulate this? Etong term na to, in this particular segment, mas kailangan kasi more exposure para maging familiar sa atin yung mga terms. Okay? Or mga techniques. So, maging familiar tayo sa mga techniques. So, yung numerator, it seems na nasa dead end na. But, how about if I change 1 into its identity? Remember that 1 is sine squared x plus cosine squared x. So, may mangyayari ba if I do that? So, ang 1, I'll change that to sine squared x plus cosine squared x minus 2 sine x cosine x. Remember that this is equal to 1. Okay? Then the denominator is cosine x plus sine x times cosine x minus sine x. Now, okay, ano yung pwedeng magawa dito sa numerator? If you notice, parang it forms something familiar. If I rearrange that to this, I'll have cosine squared x minus 2 sine x cosine x plus sine squared x. That is actually a perfect square trinomial. Diba? So let me copy the denominator, sine x and cosine x minus sine x. The numerator is a perfect square trinomial. Look, it's a squared minus 2ab, it's a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. Diba? It's a perfect square trinomial. That is the square of cosine x minus sine x. And divide that by cosine x plus sine x times cosine x minus sine x. Now, maka-cancel out na yung etong isa. Okay? So, what will remain in the equation is cosine x minus sine x over cosine x plus sine x, which is now what we are trying to prove. That one. So, quite easily done. QED, quod erat demonstrandum. That's it.